Welcome back to the sermon series, The Greatest Love. Last week we spoke about the cross of love. When you think about it, the demonstration of God's love to us through the death of Jesus on the cross is the greatest love. God gave of Himself so that we might have hope, so that His grace might allow us to be His children. What a wonderful and a beautiful picture that is. And it brings us to our topic for this week, which is sacrifice. We're going to talk about how sacrifice fits so interconnectedly with the idea of the greatest love. I've been reading from John 15, 9 through 17 at the beginning of my messages, sort of as a framework and a reminder of what Jesus said about love. John 15, 9 through 17 says, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other, that we might go and bear fruit." So the love of God, part of what God wants from you and from me as we enjoy the love of God, is to go and to bear fruit. As I said, the greatest love is intimately connected to the cross of Christ. And the concept that stands within the death of Jesus on the cross is one of sacrifice. If you look at the Old Testament in Exodus, the 12th chapter, the first 13 verses, we start seeing the importance of sacrifice for the children of Israel. Exodus 12, 1 through 13. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with the bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire, with the head, legs, and internal organs. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked under your belt, into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt." And we see in the midst of the captivity of God's children in Egypt, as Moses and Aaron are trying to convince the Pharaoh to let the people go, God has instituted a sacrifice that would protect the children of Israel from the death angel that would pass over that evening and would strike dead the firstborn of any household without the blood and the firstborn animals of places where that blood was not put over the door frames. Seems like a strange request by God. In fact, we see in the Old Testament other laws that constitute the need for sacrifice, blood sacrifice. There's a principle that God was trying to teach Israel during that time. And the principle is this, that a life must be given for a life that's saved. For the firstborn to be protected, there had to be the death of that creature. The price, it was to be the best you have, not just something cheap, not just something easily thrown away, but the best that you have. And the payment was an offering. It was an offering that was to be totally consumed, or it was to be burned up the next morning. A reminder that these payments, these offerings, these sacrifices are not momentary, but they're eternal. Something we would understand much better is Jesus died on the cross for us, not something he would have to repeat over and over again, but a sacrifice that was eternal. Let's look for a moment at Jesus' sacrifice. In John 16:16 through 33, it says, Jesus went on to say, "In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me." At this, some of the disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me, and because I am going to the Father?'" They kept asking, "What does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he is saying." Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? Very truly, I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come, but when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that is a child born into the world. So with you, now it is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. In that day you will no longer ask me anything. Very truly, I tell you, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now, you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. Though I have been speaking figuratively, a time is coming when I will no longer use this kind of language, but will tell you plainly about my Father. In that day, you will ask in my name. I'm not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and entered the world. Now I am leaving the world and going back to the Father." Then Jesus' disciples said, "Now you are speaking clearly and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God." "Do you now believe?" Jesus replied. "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." In this, Jesus was pointing to the fact that he was going to be leaving them. We know that's through his death, and then he would resurrect. Hebrews 9:12 reminds us of the perfect sacrifice that was Jesus. Hebrews 9:12 through 14 says, "He did not enter by means of blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. The blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean sanctify them so that they are outwardly clean. How much more then will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our consciences from acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God?" A perfect sacrifice. Jesus had a perfect attitude. Philippians 2:6 through 8 says, "Who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus' attitude was one of a willingness to sacrifice. He was a perfect example. Not so with you, Mark 10:43 through 45. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The bottom line is that love sacrifices. A mother living in a tenement house went shopping for groceries. While she was in the store, a fire engine raced by. She wondered, is the fire engine going to my home? She had left her baby asleep at home. Forgetting about the groceries, she ran toward home. Her building had fire hoses aimed at it. It was burning like a matchbox. Rushing to the chief, she cried out, "My baby is up there." He shouted back to her, "It would be suicide for anyone to go up there now. It's too late." A young fireman standing by volunteered, "Chief, I have a little baby at home, and if my house were on fire, I'd want someone to go up to save my baby. I'll go." The young fireman climbed the stairs. He got the baby, threw her into the rescue net, and just as he did, the house collapsed and he was burned to death. The scene is 20 years later at a graveside. A 20-year-old woman is sobbing softly. Before her, at the head of this grave, is the statue of a fireman. A man stopping by asks respectfully, "Was that your father?" She replies, "No." "Was that your brother?" "No," she says. "That's the man who died for me." Sacrifice makes a difference. It's the way of love. Ephesians 5:1 and 2 says, "Follow God's example. Therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." It's the way of Jesus. Sacrifice is the way of Christians. Galatians 2:20 says, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." Jesus sacrificed all for us. We ought to sacrifice all for him. Love sacrifices. William Sangster, the great British Methodist preacher, once wrote concerning Jesus' death, "If he was a man, it was murder. If he was God, it was an offering. If he was man, it was martyrdom. If he was God, it was sacrifice. If he was man, they took his life from him. If he was God, he laid it down himself. If he was man, we are all called to admiration. If he was God, we are called to adoration. If he was man, we must stand up and take our hats off. If he was God, we must fall down and give him our hearts." The challenge this week, as we've been going over the last many months, keep Kenwood connected. It was our challenge in January, and we're trying to remember to stay connected with one another over these months. In February, we added connecting others to Jesus as a way to have a conversation with someone about Jesus. This month, we've added share the greatest love. The challenge this week is to make a sacrifice. That could be letting someone else have what they want, perhaps giving away money or possessions, but the point is, sacrifice something this week. God bless. Have a wonderful day.